Of all of the Pixar theories I've created over the past year, this one has to be the one I'm the most proud of. If you've been paying attention, you would have noticed that Pixar has finally, at long last, released the official trailer for Elemental. And on the surface, you may not see a connection between this movie and Pixar's other movies. But let me tell you, this actually connects some major plot points of the Pixar theory. Everything from the origins of the Supers and the Incredibles and the true whereabouts of the monster world, down to Ellie from Up being the potential adopted mother of one of Riley's grandparents. So you're going to want to pay attention because this is about to get interesting. To start, we have to ask ourselves three main questions. Where is Element City? When does this take place? And finally, how does this connect to Pixar's other movies? And it first requires us to ask the simple question, does this take place on Earth? At first glance, you would assume it's a definite no. However, when you actually pay attention to the technology they're using, it quickly becomes apparent that their society is very reminiscent of human society. Throughout both of the trailers, we can see everything from subways to headphones to barbecues, and it's clear that they have at least some knowledge of human society. So here we have two possible scenarios. Either A, humans were inspired by element society, or B, elements were inspired by human society. Maybe these two societies are more connected than we think. I can think of one other Pixar society that's very similar, the Monster World. Or more accurately, the Monster City. Because what people fail to notice is that we are never actually shown outside of Monstropolis or its surrounding area. We know that Monsters University is located at least relatively close to Monstropolis because of the time it took them to travel to the Monsters Inc. factory. And it does seem a little strange that their city would be called Monstropolis, just naming it after themselves. Unless the Monster World is actually just Monstropolis, meaning that their world consists of only one city. As with Elemental, we are once again forced to ask ourselves, does this take place on Earth? And I know you're probably thinking, of course not. It's made clear that this is in a universe parallel to ours. And if anything, you might assume that this is some faraway planet where they can teleport to the human world, which is Earth. Well, it was essentially confirmed by Pixar themselves that the monster world and human world are in fact one and the same. But we'll get to that in a second. Our first clue actually isn't in either Monsters Inc. or Monsters University, but in the TV show Monsters at Work. And it's this quote from Val that struck me as a little bit odd and out of place.
Yeah, after MU, I lived in the Caribbean for a year. Island time.
Hold on, she just said she lived in the Caribbean, obviously a play on words of the Caribbean. But then what would that mean? That the monsters have their own versions of real-world places? Well, lucky for us, Pixar actually left us a backstory on the monster world, which can be found on the DVD bonus features. This short tells the story of the Mans and the Mons, the predecessors to humans and monsters. If you're not familiar with this story, let me catch you up. The Mans and Mons once coexisted until the Mons tried to make friends with the Mans. The Mans thought that the Mons were hairy and smelled bad, so they drove them out to sea. They swam until they came upon an enchanted island. There they ate magical fruit until they became bigger and hairier. Then they went back to the Mans and got revenge on them, and essentially the tradition continued and eventually led to the world that we see in Monsters Inc. And to answer my question, it actually does take place on Earth according to this bonus feature. And I know you're wondering what all this has to do with Elemental, and I'm getting to that. To start, we can actually look to the Good Dinosaur to see where the humans first originated. It's clear that at this point, humans are limited in their numbers, going by how Arlo reacts to seeing one. And just the fact that we don't see any others in the movie besides Arlo and his family. So I'm gonna say that the Mans and the Mons story takes place sometime after the Good Dinosaur, since by that point they had already formed tribes. Now to find out where Monstropolis is located, we have to figure out at least relatively where the Good Dinosaur takes place, and where the Mons migrated to. By the landscape, it's clear that this is somewhere in the Americas, although it's hard to determine exactly where. Most of the research for this movie was done in Wyoming. Not to say for sure that's where this takes place though, because Wyoming is kind of in the middle of nowhere and not near any major bodies of water. My guess would be that this could take place anywhere from the east coast of the United States through Central America. Although it doesn't matter exactly where, because by this point there were probably Mans all over the Americas. So if humans first started appearing in these regions, then that would mean that the Mons swam to an island somewhere in this region, in which there are a lot of options. We can exclude Bermuda because of how far out it is. So that leaves us with the Bahamas, Cuba, Puerto Rico, and Jamaica. Realistically, they probably landed somewhere in the Bahamas just because it's the closest, but I would say that by the time of Monsters Inc. and Monsters University, the monsters inhabit all 4 of these islands, which would finally make sense of this quote from Val. Now, how does all of this connect to Elemental? Well, just like the Monster Society, Elements also have their own society in which there are no humans. So where is Element City located? Most likely, it's probably located in the same region because it seems pretty clear that humans in the Pixar universe aren't a big fan of any intelligent species that's not human. Whether that be the monsters or elementals. Just like the monsters, the elementals could have once shared a society until humans drove them out to sea. So it's probably safe to say that Element City is on one of these tropical islands as well. From the look of the surrounding area in the trailer, it actually backs up this theory because of how tropical the water looks. And it does appear to be on an island from what I can tell just by looking at some of these images that flash by during the trailer. You can see boats passing under bridges, further implying it taking place on an island. There was also a map of Element City in the first trailer, which clearly shows that this city is surrounded by a body of water. And that pretty much seals the deal for this being on a Caribbean island. So that answers our first question of where this takes place. Now we need to bring this full circle and find out what this really means for the Pixar theory. Although elementals appear to be a new concept added to the Pixar universe, there are actually 2 other examples of elementals that have been hiding in plain sight. First, in the Pixar short Partly Cloudy, and second, Jack Jack himself from The Incredibles. I'll get to him in a second though. First, let's start with Partly Cloudy. The air residents from Element City probably look familiar to you because it is almost the exact same design for the cloud characters in Partly Cloudy. So why are they here? Although I can't say for certain, we do know that these clouds are part of the air category of elements. Contrary to what I initially thought, elements are separated into fire, water, land, and air, and aren't the elements of the periodic table. That being the case, it does confuse me why there would be a sign with the symbols for hydrogen and aluminum in the original teaser trailer. Anyway, with air residents being outside of Airtown, or should I say, Cloud Town,
Get it, Jake. It's Cloud Town.
it makes you wonder why they are where they are and not in Airtown. So I'm gonna say that these guys are kinda like the sea monsters in Luca. The sea monsters are still monsters and originated from the Mons. They just adapted to survive underwater and eventually made their way as far north as Italy. These clouds are probably the same case where even though they are not welcomed by humans, they still decide to venture off. And for starters, where even are we? Our first clue is right here, where of all people, Ellie Fredrickson from Up can be seen in the window with her accepting a baby from a stork. And if you've watched Up, this on the surface makes absolutely no sense, because it was made clear in Up that Ellie was unable to have children, and we can see Carl and Ellie's lives play out during the montage with no trace of an adopted kid. But I actually know who this baby is, and I'll prove it. In Inside Out, we can see that Riley's parents have a picture in the house of Ellie from Up. So you would assume that she is a relative of the family, and if I hadn't seen this short, I would have dismissed this Easter egg. But now that we can see that Ellie was delivered a baby by the stork, it all but proves that Ellie is the adopted mother of one of Riley's parents. Or even possibly grandparents. See, I don't think it could be either of her parents because this baby has blonde hair, which neither of her parents do. But the strange thing is that Riley herself does. So if Inside Out takes place in 2015, and this is taking place in the 1950s to 60s, then that would actually make it just barely possible for this to be Riley's great-grandfather. On which side is unclear, however. But I'm not going to get too in-depth about this right now because this could be its whole own video. Now what's weird is that it was recently announced that an Up short called Carl's Date will play before Elemental in theaters. It seems a little too coincidental given the connection between the 2 movies because of Partly Cloudy. And what's also out of place is that Carl would even consider dating at this point in his life after he lost Ellie. And in the Dug Days series, we can see that he's mostly to himself, and it's not like he's going out and meeting new people. Unless this is someone he already knew. Possibly the mysterious woman known as Emma Jean. If you don't know who this is, it's a long story, but basically, a postcard can be seen in Up and in the trailer for Toy Story 3 sent by a woman named Emma Jean. It was later confirmed by Pete Docter that she was Carl's ex-girlfriend from back in the day. I'm not going to get into any theories surrounding her right now, but I do believe that we might finally get to see this character that's been left anonymous for almost 14 years. And now on to Jack Jack, who is also an elemental, and like I did with Partly Cloudy, I'll prove it. Unlike most of the supers, Jack has powers that are actually able to transform him into something different. His powers include a fire phase, a water phase, and a smoke phase, all of which could represent the elements of fire, water, and air. The smoke, of course, resembling the clouds. Which means that somewhere down the bloodline, Jack is related to the elementals. And to look at it on an even bigger scope, all of the supers may even be descendants of elementals. We're never given a backstory to how the supers even got their powers, so it leads me to believe that the supers' powers are a result of the combined powers of elements through the generations. We do hear in the trailer for Elemental that the residents of Element City live by the rule that elements can't mix.
We all live by one simple rule.
Elements cannot mix.
So I'm not sure if there are more elementals beyond what we can see in Element City, but according to Partly Cloudy, there might be. I can't say for sure how all of this will fit in until the movie is actually released, but I think this is a strong theory for what we have right now. Anyway, let me know what you think of this theory in the comments, and while you're at it, why don't you check out this video about who the parents of Lightning McQueen are. Thank you for watching, and bye!